This is the biggest escalation of East-West tensions since the Cold War.
Yeah, so we've seen UK natural gas prices today rise by around 10%.
Wow.
Oil price inching closer to $100 a barrel. That's up by about 40% since the lows in December. So clearly we're seeing the geopolitical implications for the dynamics between supply and demand in the energy markets. They were already very tight, that's the thing. We had supercharged demand after COVID, coupled by limited supply. And now this is another pressure that's creating uncertainty about the outlooks for supplies in the energy complex and driving prices higher.
It's interesting, isn't it, Howard? You know, we can show pictures from the Russia-Ukrainian border. It seems a very distant conflict to lots of our viewers and listeners, perhaps right on the other side of Europe. But we're already seeing the implications, even today, of this escalating tensions in terms of the pound in our pocket as we go to fill up our cars and vans.
Absolutely right, Liam, and thank you for having me on your show. This is a disastrous day, what's happening at the moment, but it's actually manna for heaven for the speculators further up the fuel supply chain, because they are ripping off motorists. No one knows how this is happening. We're getting most of our oil, for example, for petrol and diesel, from the Middle East. Why is Russia having this impact to incredible increases? We hear that the wholesale price of diesel and petrol is going up 3 to 4p today. And will that be passed on? Of course it will, but it'll be passed on in droves, something like 3 times that amount. And I see pump prices exceeding £1.60 very soon.
Malcolm, you're there in your ivory tower, Imperial College London. You're a world authority on global energy markets and energy strategy. Of course, we need to focus on what's happening militarily, diplomatically. We need to think about the safety of British troops and so on as this conflict escalates. But there are big economic implications too, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, let's keep this in perspective. Compared to what happened in the 70s, the oil price shock then, this is relatively small beer at the moment. We had an oil price then of $150 a barrel in money of the day.
On the Yom Kippur War and Arab-Israeli tensions.
And the OPEC getting its act together through the 80s. And what happened then was the world responded. It built a lot of nuclear power as a hedge to that. It built a lot of coal capacity. And markets do respond over time towards this. So these are not forever high prices. As long as we don't interfere with the market's ability to make investments out of the money it's making through, say, windfall taxes or whatever that remove the incentive to invest, then I think the market will respond to this. But what can't happen overnight. These are very long-term investments. In fact, it's the history of energy that these are investments with decades-long horizons, which are being taken on the basis of what happened last week and maybe the week before.
And would you say, Malcolm, ordinarily it's just nerdy people like you and me that talk about the proportion of gas that comes from Russia and oil price margins and all the rest of it. But now this is absolutely mainstream news, centre stage, given the cost of living crisis. Do you think this may provoke a kind of rethink in the British government in terms of the amount of gas storage we need? We've got hardly any in terms of our nuclear capability. We need more if we're going to insulate ourselves from global conflicts and tensions in terms of the supply of fossil fuels to our shores.
In a sense, that's what crises like this are for, is to refocus on those long-term issues. Already we have the government talking very positively about nuclear power, which is a very good thing. We are, you're quite right about storage. We've got about a week's worth of storage. Most of our competitors have about 3 months.
Unbelievable. Like the Germans, the Dutch, the Spanish.
Yeah, and if I wanted to play devil's advocate on that, while we had huge North Sea reserves, we didn't need storage.
That's right.
Because the reserves were their own storage. We could just increase output from North Sea. Of course, we had a glorious decade when we were exporting gas. We now are out of it. We use the same energy every day of the week. 3 days we'd be making our own. 3 days it will be coming in through pipelines. 1 day it will be coming in through tankers. Now, at the moment, it's only 5% Russian gas. Most of it's coming from Norway and from other sources. But inevitably, the effect on Europe of huge increases in Russian gas will end up affecting us.
Indeed. Victoria, turning to you, we can see already the British government making noises about, we didn't want more oil and gas exploration in the North Sea, now perhaps we do. We didn't want fracking, there was a moratorium on that. Now maybe we will start trying to exploit those shale gas reserves up there in the northwest of England and elsewhere. Financial markets must really have their eyes on these changes or potential changes in government policy, given this crisis.
Yeah, and I think it's all about the long-term transition towards green energy, and governments have been unwilling to lock into longer-term contracts within fossil fuels, and that's where we've fallen short. And actually, we need to think a lot more about bridging fuels and the fact that we're not quite there in terms of the green economy and the green infrastructure, and we still probably need fossil fuels, at least to some extent, for some time. We've talked before on the show about hydrogen. And it's about being a bit more inventive in terms of where we do get our energy from. Luckily, in the UK, we're not as dependent on Russian energy compared to, say, Germany and some of Western Europe that's got about 40% dependence. We're much lower than that. But at the same time, this is clearly affecting us, and it's impacting inflation and the cost of living crisis, because this is a major contributor to rising price levels. And that is likely to filter through in terms of higher monetary policy, tighter financial conditions.
Higher interest rates and so on.
And higher interest rates, exactly.
Howard, turning back to you, bringing it down to the sharp end, the motorist, the householder with our fuel and energy bills, do you think the government's going to have to do more? We know there's this cost of living triple whammy coming in April. We talk about it all the time on GB News. We've got high national insurance contributions. We've got high utility bills as that Ofgem energy regulator price cap kicks in. It's much higher. We've got higher inflation in general, maybe then 7 or even 8%. Do you think the government is going to have to act to try and rein in the petrol retailers, particularly the motorway service station retailers that are charging 10% more than everyone else, to perhaps give households more help with their fuel bills this April?
Well, Liam, I couldn't put it any better what you just said and what Victoria said about the impact on inflation on our cost of living. The important thing is, and it saddens me, and I respect what you're saying, but one of the things is we're talking about markets. People out there, you know, the lady that's going to visit her mother-in-law in hospital, etc., in her Peugeot 105, it doesn't know how much she's going to be paying at the pumps next week. What we do need is the government. It's very simple, and I'm working with backbench MPs, people like Robert Halfon and Craig McKinley, and we're calling on a body called Pump Watch for petrol and diesel, whereby you mentioned Ofgem, we've got Ofcom. Why haven't we got for 37 million UK drivers some sort of consumer protection? We don't want a price cap. We want all retailers and the fuel supply chain to make a healthy profit. But please, can we have transparency at the pump? So when oil goes up or comes down or the exchange rate changes, we understand what we'll be paying a few days later.
And those big profits for the major global oil companies operating in the UK, Labour's idea of a windfall tax is likely to get a bit more traction in the coming weeks and months, I'd say.